Today we are on listening experience number 14. We're going to talk about the harpsichord. The harpsichord falls under a category of instrument called zithers. The first instrument which developed into what we now know the harpsichord was called a psaltery. It looked kind of like a miniature harpsichord, but it didn't have a keyboard, and it was kind of like a lap harp, sort of. But those date back to the medieval times. They've been around a long time. The concept of controlling a musical instrument with a keyboard was not new by the time the harpsichord came around. It had already been figured out for the organ. And they actually, the earliest version of that, they had one that was called a hydraulis, and it was controlled by water. That's kind of an interesting thing. The adding of the second set of strings was the biggest innovation with a harpsichord, because what you have now is the ability to play in two different volumes. You have one keyboard that is for playing loud and one that is for playing soft. And that happened in the 16th century in an area known as Flanders, which is modern day Belgium, basically. But they're the ones that figured out how to do that. In the 19th century, mid to late 1800s, the popularity of this newfangled instrument called the pianoforte, or the piano, kind of took over the popularity of the harpsichord. It was much easier to play, and you could play with a variety of keys because of the way it was tuned, and you could play in a variety of volumes depending on how hard you pushed. So it had a couple technical advancements, and harpsichords kind of became passé. So much so that in Paris at the conservatory, they took all of their, well, most of their harpsichords in the late 1800s and replaced them with pianos and used the harpsichords for firewood. Oops. They probably could have saved a few and made a lot of money. The most common kind of strings you will see on a harpsichord are made of metal. They do have a lot of tension on them, so the soundboard has to be very, very, sturdy. Most of the time you'll hear harpsichord in Baroque music, Bach, Vivaldi, Handel, that kind of stuff, that era. But it has been used even in modern jazz. So it's all over the place. The biggest difference between a piano and a harpsichord is the way that the string is made to vibrate. On a harpsichord, they use something called a plectrum. There's two different kinds for the loud and the soft. The plectrum either plucks the string to make it loud or brushes by the string to make it soft. There's a little picture of it on the key. You can see that later on your little quiz. Strictly speaking, the basic definition of a zither is any stringed instrument whose strings are the same length as its soundboard. So, if you look at like harp, doesn't really have a soundboard per se. It's got a sound box at the bottom, so it's not really a zither. If you look at hurdy-gurdy, I think that counts as one. There's all these lap instruments that are played like in Appalachia, and they're all over Eastern Europe too. There's kind of a modern rediscovery of the harpsichord. In the 20th century, near the end of World War II, there were a few people that started making recordings on modern replicas of Baroque instruments. There were a few that are still around, and they could make recordings on original instruments, but they're not as common. So they started making new ones in the style of the old ones. So that's basically when that happened. All right, we're going to listen today to a harpsichord concerto by Johann Sebastian Bach. So hold on to your seats. This is pretty exciting stuff. Here it comes. All right, that's your first experience with a harpsichord concerto, perhaps. Next week, we'll look at our final one for this semester, which will be the kalumbu, African musical bow. Very interesting sound. All righty. See you later. Bye.